Test it. Test. Very good. All right, cool. Alrighty. Yes?
So this is the second in a series, right? Or is this the first?
This is the first, so you don't need any of the prior knowledge, actually.
Sweet.
It'd be better if you have some prior knowledge as far as like JavaScript to help each other out. And actually, good thing we bring this up. Anybody know JavaScript already? Just raise your hand. All right, so and so, so and so. Okay, you guys are my TAs, okay? So when we're gonna do a lot of practices, so what I want you guys to do is, first of all, try it yourself. And if you still can't get it, then stay to your guns, and I'll come by and help you out. But in the meantime, everybody else that, this is easy stuff, then go around and roam and help somebody else out. All right, so, oops, navigate start. You can just click on this guy. Yeah. So, we're going to do this way. We have, if that gets too annoying, just let me know and I can get rid of it, okay? I can talk louder now, really. So, we have 66 slides. So we're not going to go through all of it in one shot. We're going to pace ourselves, we're going to ask questions, and I expect you guys to ask them. And if you're stuck somewhere, then just stop us. Let's see. So get the Google Chrome going, and you also need, that's it. Actually, that's it. Yeah. All right. I used to work for Google, and I still kind of am a MooTools developer. And if you're familiar with MooTools, JavaScript, jQuery, and Prototype, MooTools is the #2 most used framework in the world. It used to be the case. I'm pretty sure I'm not quoting it right now. Right now. But what that means is that I was part of the JavaScript world. So at one point, I was part of the JavaScript development committee, like the actual language, and that was interesting, but at the same time, very, very annoying. You try to push something, and they knock it down, and then you tell them that things shouldn't be this way, and there's a lot of chefs in the kitchen. But anyway, I've had over 10 years of experience doing software development. Out of the 4 of us that are in the board, I'm the software developer. We have a wireless nerd, we have a networking nerd, an IT nerd, and we have a guy that develops apps as well. And anyway, out of all of us, I have the most experience, I say. I could be wrong. Most experience in developing apps, and I really love web technology. That's been my bread and butter from the very beginning. So I love JavaScript, PHP, and I love to do crazy things with them. So if you guys ever have an idea and you have a question, by all means come on up and I can explain how things are done or how we do things. One of our goals and our initiatives is to mentor, so just come up to us. So you're going to see some slides like this that says objectives, and the reason for that is the following slides, I want you guys to do this. So we're going to get going really quick, and here's where you go. So I'm sure by now you know what JavaScript is, and if you don't, let me show you by example. You have Google Maps, and if you didn't know this, but Google Maps is 100% JavaScript. This dragging motion that I'm doing right here, that's not you literally dragging it, it's actually an HTML element that you're dragging. So I can Control-Shift-C, and I can see the element here, this one. And if I drag it, you can see that some things are moving in the code. And that's not you as a person moving it, that's the JavaScript doing it. I can actually disable JavaScript by going in here, settings, and disable JavaScript. And at this point in time, refresh it. And you'll notice that I broke Google Maps. And it says, when you have eliminated JavaScript, whatever remains must be an empty page. Because everything in Google Maps is JavaScript. So you may not have noticed it, but over 90%, I forgot the exact number, but over 90% of websites, they require, like there's no other way around it, they require it. The only exception to that rule is websites like Google.com, where they don't care if you have modern technology. They just want you to search, right? So in this example, if I go to Google, you can see things happen without me doing anything. If I disable it, so I'm already there. So settings, disable JavaScript, and refresh it, you'll notice that when I type something, nothing happens. And even when I search, you get to this weird looking, funky, old, like if you guys were around like a couple of years ago, this should remind you of like an old, like Google. So they still have pure HTML Google. And I think if you go to Gmail, that might be another service where they allow you to continue using it without JavaScript. I could be wrong. Yeah, JavaScript must be enabled. But anyway, my point being is JavaScript is everywhere, and the best way that you can remember the rule is JavaScript is the behavior, is the interactivity of a website. And right now we're talking about web, but it could be anything else. It's the C of the web. It's the C++ of the web. This is the language of the web. And if you're not familiar, the other components of web development are CSS and HTML. We haven't done a class on CSS. We've done a little bit on HTML, but not that much either. I mean, there's very little to say to it except that you put XML tags together. But the CSS one would be interesting if anybody has familiarity with it and has expertise. That by all means, that would be a really cool class to have. So let me know. And yeah, this is the stack basically. HTML provides the structure, so the foundation and the walls of the house, and the CSS is the color, the painting, the I guess now also the effects of how the doors open, and then the behavior would be the doorknobs and the keys, and then allow access through, and etc. Even if you have like this robot butler, this could be JavaScript as well. Again, I just want to put it in context that you might understand. Another context you might want to know is that there's huge demand for JavaScript, and the reason for that is mobile app development, as well as web design, and even back-end systems are now in JavaScript. So there's really, JavaScript has extended from this area that is on the web only to everywhere else. So there are 600, at the time that I did this, I forgot exactly when I did it, I think it was a month ago, 640,000 jobs were available for JavaScript. 640,000. And the starting pay is 60,000, starting. So there are 430 for CSS, 430,000, and the starting pay is 50,000. And I just out of curiosity wanted to see how professors do, So there's only 110,000 professor jobs, and the starting pay is 30,000. So go in for school for 8 years of your life, or invest 1 year of your life into JavaScript, and you're earning more than a professor starting out. I don't know. I think the math is clear. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that, and this is why it's such a high demand, is that JavaScript, as you can see here, is the number one most used, language when it comes to development of projects. There are 3.5 million active repositories on GitHub right now. And if you're not familiar with GitHub, it's where everybody puts in their code. So that's crazy, 3.5 million. The next one after that is Java, with 2.3. So that's still a million more repositories, a million more active code out there that is running JavaScript. So sometimes people ask me, how do I start a program? What do I do? What's the steps? I really say you can learn Python or you can learn JavaScript. I sometimes say Python just because of their age. It does take patience, and it is a difficult language overall compared to Python, but if you already noticed, that there's much more applicability to JavaScript. So if you're in the crowd and you want to switch careers, not saying to do it overnight, but I am saying that this is a good investment. It has been for me and for other people, and definitely encourage you guys to buy in. And so just quickly, I want to get a feel for what people know. Normally I would write things down on the board, but I feel that we can just yell things out. What do you guys think? So let's start with the following. This is called the KWL, what you know already, what you want to know, and what you just learned now. And we'll leave the last column at the end. But for now, if people can start yelling out what is a programming language, or if you know about JavaScript, what do you know about JavaScript? So just start yelling it out. Everybody at once.
While loops.
Huh?
While loops.
Okay, so while loop. So I'm just going to create 2 columns here instead. I know I said I wasn't, but here I am anyway. So while loops. Okay, so yeah, while loops is a construct of a programming language.
If-else statements.
Yeah, so there's statements, so if, else. Okay, but what about programming languages? Anything else in general, aside from like the specifics of it? Anything else about programming languages? What do you know?
C#.
Okay, so C# is a programming language? Okay. What do programming languages do? Does anybody know?
They tell the computer what they give instructions on what to do.
Okay, they give instructions. Manipulating data? Okay, so one of the instructions could be manipulate data. Okay. Anybody else? What else? What do you know about programming languages?
Some are object-oriented.
Okay, so the word object-oriented, like what does that mean? Yeah. Object-oriented and the opposite, or there's another one that's called functional. And there's the reactive, that's pretty new, in case you didn't know. Object-oriented, functional, and reactive. Anybody else have anything to add?
Static versus dynamic.
Okay, yeah, so static. Can you explain a little bit on the static and the dynamic? What do you mean by that?
Like, let's say, like, the old languages are mostly static, but now we're having a whole bunch of new languages that are dynamic, like Ruby and
Yeah.
Ruby
I think your word you're looking for is compile time versus runtime, right? Or another way of saying runtime is just in time. So, anything else? So, I'm going to quickly go over this, and what do you guys want to know? Before I go into it, what do you guys want to know? What do you want to know about programming languages? What do you want to know about JavaScript? That way I can answer everything at once.
Where do you start?
Okay, where to start? Anybody else?
How to like make a database and like with SQL connect it with JavaScript like on a website.
So database, I'm going to summarize that to application stack, right? Okay, anybody else? What do you want to know? And how does that relate to programming, right? Anything else?
It would be nice to know, like you had on GitHub, like the language JavaScript, but then also the frameworks. What are the best frameworks out there?
What are the tools / frameworks to use? Okay, very good. And then I'm going to add one in there for you guys, and that is how does it work? Okay. All right, so we have a good extensive list, and so let me just go over one by one. So static versus dynamic. JavaScript is a runtime or just-in-time language, and I'll explain how that works over here. The way the programming languages work overall is that you have, let me use a different color, or in this case, non-color. So in this case, we're going to write our code, and what happens is you give this code off to something else. Let's call it a black box. And this black box is I'm just going to use non-technical terms, the translator. Okay, this translator, or another way of thinking about it, is the interpreter. The interpreter passes this eventually out to your computer, to your motherboard or whatever. And nowadays they have huge heat sinks, but you know what I mean. So your motherboard, your card. So it goes in here and eventually goes back to, let's say, the operating system, and then you can see the results in your screen, and you can even see your results in the code, etc. But anyway, they just have this feedback overall, or response. So this is very fuzzy. But this is the general way that programming languages work, or how a computer program runs overall. So you write something in a human instructions. A human instruction could be a simple recipe, like in a way that's a programming language, right? Like it programs us humans to make another recipe, right? So a human instruction, and then the translator reads, so it reads the instructions and knows how to output zeros and ones. Or another way of thinking about this, assembly instructions. So computer instructions, okay? So you have instructions that are written in English primarily. There's other languages that you can use. You can do CAT, like Nyan, like programming if you wanted to, or like pirate programming. And you have this translator that translates that into machine. And the machine does what you tell it to do. The machine doesn't know any better. And the machine gives you back the results, okay? And the programming languages, or the translator, the interpreter, it kind of handles the feedback, it kind of handles what you get back out of it, but this is the general setup. So when I say static versus dynamic, this translator, this interpreter, could be run at the same time. Could be running always, like always waiting for you to give it instructions. Or it could be sitting there, and you have to run and execute it in order to output the results. So static versus dynamic. Now, so that's that one. So JavaScript is a runtime, just-in-time programming language. The moment that you give it the instruction, you know, by magic, if you will, it translates that into machine code, and the machine does it. And there are crazy things like security and blah, blah, that we're not going to go into, but it's awesome. Like JavaScript and any other runtime language, Ruby was mentioned, PHP is another one. You don't have to wait for the compiling. Like if you've ever done compiling before, it usually takes like 30 seconds to a minute or more. Like it depends on the size of the program and all the things you have included in it. So it just it's exponentially faster. The best part about this as well is that the errors happen as it happens, or it could be taken both ways. But the errors, you see them before and during, and anyway, it's just easier to debug, and we'll do that today as well. So the while loops, the if statements, there's a for loop as well, there's Boolean logics, we'll go over them. All of those are constructs of a programming language. And the thing I wanted to mention about that is that JavaScript is not unique in any way. Like the same for loop could be done in Python. The same for loop could be done in Ruby. But the way that it's expressed and written out is different. So your job on how to get started with programming is to learn what that looks like. And all of it is, they're just templates, really. They're just patterns. You as the user have to know how to recall those patterns and put them on the white, notepad or whatever. You decide what goes in there. So you're building this house, and there's nobody telling you, I need the wall here. You decide. So it's this huge shift in mindset. And I just want you guys to be comfortable with the fact that you have to put up the instructions. There is drag and drop things that you can do, but I would rather you guys know how to do the math and then use a calculator later. So C# is a programming language. I already mentioned PHP, Ruby, there's a bunch of them. My best advice is to go to Wikipedia, you'll see a bunch of them. Or just look at the top most used languages and go from there. I would just go from the top to the bottom. They say that a good programmer learns a new programming language every year. So, that gives you the benchmark. If you're not learning a programming language every year, then you're getting rusty. I know I learned C++, I put it away, then learned another one, and I learned another one again, and then I went back to C++, and I saw it in a different light. So it's not like a new one, but it's refresh yourself every year. And yeah, you give instructions, you can manipulate data, that could be part of the instructions. Some of these instructions that are translated over here, you could do something that says print, but the translator or the language itself, it doesn't just do this. It does this, and then it does this, and then after that, it gives you back the result. So like the language, as well as any library or software or tools that you have, will actually give you a lot more functionality than you have to worry about. Like C, you have to do everything by hand. Like you have to do the memory allocation, you have to deallocate. But when it comes to JavaScript, you don't have to worry about any of that. So each language is different. And like I said, the repositories and tooling that's available varies so highly on each language, but let's see. And yeah, object-oriented functional, pretty much the object-oriented, just want to say really quickly is that's the current mode, is if you're not writing an object-oriented, then you're writing things back in the 1980s. I don't want to say too much about that because we are going to write like we're in the 1980s, so if you become a serious programmer and you want to develop code that is reusable, encapsulated, you know, all the best practices like the separation concerns and modeling each of the systems that you have, then you can look into these. Right now, all you have to worry about is solve the problem. Just get it done. Don't worry about repeating yourself. Don't worry about being extremely slow. You know, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, I think. Like, I don't care if you write the most beautiful code. Is it working? Does it do what you wanted it to do? So don't worry about this stuff right now. You can worry about it if you're into it. Like, I would encourage you to read the book Code Complete. It's a Microsoft book, believe it or not. It's actually really good. And Pragmatic Programmer. And I read these books because they're not about a programming language. It's about how to actually program legibly, maintainable, readable, etc. These are the books that I would encourage you guys to read, but this is not that class. So where to start is by being to these events, by going, I actually did a presentation on how to get started with programming, so you can start there, review that video. And overall, just a summary of that is find something to do and just do it. Doesn't matter if it takes you 1 month, 2 months to get it done, or how many times you have to come back here to, you know, ask us questions. I know Mario, who is not here, Mario has been asking me questions on PHP all this time, and each time I see him improving. And before that, he had to do it on his own, and it just took forever. And how does it work? That's it. The application stack, we're going to go over like briefly, and it's along with this frameworks. The best way that you can do that is there's a bunch of these real quick. This is an aside, but to answer your question, if you go to GitHub and you go to, again, GitHub is a great resource, and you just put awesome and put PHP, for example, and you're going to get a bunch of these awesome something or others. And say you're trying to learn PHP or even JavaScript, right? I mean, we're doing that right now. So you do awesome JavaScript and just do the most stars, because you're going to get to the main one, like this one. And it says a collection, make it larger, a collection of awesome browser-side JavaScript libraries. And you go to the README, and there are all the links, all the frameworks, all things, and you can do it that way. The second way I would suggest for you to know how to do something is slideshare.net. And what you need to do there is just put in their application stack. And you're going to see a bunch of application stacks. The ones that you see most often come up, or the one that has the most conferences, that's a pretty good indicator that it's a good application stack. Like Ember, like React, like all those are active ones. So, and if you look at the SlideShare, they go over every single tooling that they want you to use. So any stack, like databases, like web, and any of the other front-end stuff, you're either going to mess with JavaScript, PHP, Ruby, or even Python as well. Those are the primary ones. You can learn Java for web development, but that's really corporate level. And I know when I was at Google, they were using Java for web. So, but right now that you guys are starting out, don't bother with any of that. Just stick to either JavaScript, PHP, or any of the other ones like Python or Ruby. Okay. Any questions? I know we talk about a lot of things. Anything else? So this just briefly goes over what I described over there. And that is that it's a tool that you define it in human instructions that we can read, that we can interpret, but then some other program or something else translates that into human, into machine instructions. And to give you an example of why we need these rules, why we need the syntax, I need a volunteer to read that statement. Or I can cold call somebody. I'm going to point. Go for it.
Whatever you can do or dream, you can. Whatever you can do or dream, you can do it. You can do, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin, it now goeth.
Okay. Now, do me a favor and read it again. Go ahead.
Whatever you can do or dream, you can do. Begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now. Goeth.
All right. So, what's the difference between this one and this one?
There's so many grammatical errors.
So, when you say grammatical errors,
Syntax.
exactly, right? Like, if it wasn't for those dots, the capitalization, and I know I'm bold, I know I'm coloring it with red, but if it wasn't for those things, one, you didn't know how to pace yourself, right? Like, you're like, where
Yeah.
should I start? And
I'm glad that's like done on purpose because I was feeling really dumb.
No, I know, yeah. Sorry, I didn't pick on you because I'm like, I need him to like go down a step or two. No. I just needed somebody to read it because anybody that was reading it, I'm sure people were reading it in your head and you're like, what? The difference between us as humans and a computer is that if you forget that punctuation in JavaScript, you forget that punctuation in Ruby and anything else, it will just stop. And now, let me explain the logic behind that. Like, why would you think that if you forget that dash, why would you think that the computer should just crash? Or like the program should just crash? Is there a particular reason why you might think that be the case?
It could be ambiguous, like the computer doesn't know what
Yeah. Yeah, like, so imagine you have a financial application, right? And it assumes things for you, and you don't know what the computer does for you. Like, you're hoping it does what you're thinking it does. So, say you forgot that period, and you're like, the computer's like, oh, you didn't mean to put a period. You meant to say $1,000. Okay, I'll withdraw $1,000 from your bank account, right? Like, instead of $10. So, no, like, when it comes to financial institutions or anything else in programming, the rule of the law is don't assume things. Assumption is the rule of all evil. So in this case, the fact that you're going to have these dots, these semicolons, these parentheses, all these things that are going in the language, all these things that are going on in the language, they are required. There is no other way around it. You just need to accept the fact. And I know I'm preaching to the choir because you guys are here voluntarily, but I just want to make sure that we understand that if I see a parentheses, like in the pattern, you remember you need to put parentheses. If you see quotation marks for all the strings, then put quotation marks in the strings that you're going to put in there. Do not put quotation marks for anything else. And we'll go over that in a little bit. But that's programming. It's insanely stupid, but you just have to follow the rules. If you follow the rules, then you'll be fine at programmer. And from there, it's just more like logic and can you solve a problem solve, etc. So for the next 10 minutes, real quick, just take a little break from all the things we've said. I want us to do, let's do it by rows, okay? So all this row, next row, the row after that, and the row after that, and so forth. And if you need to just mingle bunch each other, you can do that. But I want you guys to think about what are the instructions to create a peanut butter and jelly. Again, I know it sounds stupid, but I want you guys to do this. I'm going to put the timer on. And instead of 10 minutes, I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes, and then we'll do 5 minutes of discussion, okay? So you may start. Okay, where's the bread from? Where'd the plate come from?
You're going to be doing that now. Where'd you get the bread? Don't you have to open it?
Do you use your right hand when you open it, or?
Use it right? Where'd you get your shell?
It says, consider that the person that will read the instructions needs to be told every single step.
Yeah, we're on the
Make up your place. Imagine you're
Guys, when you open the jar, do you go clockwise, counterclockwise? Do you get 1 ounce of jelly, 2 ounces of jelly? Do you get jelly or do you get peanut butter first? Do you put it on both sides of the bread?
Grab the bread, grab the jelly. Put it on the kitchen
Yeah, let's just be a beast, put the whole can of peanut butter and jelly on it.
The bread at the same time, right? Put it down and grab a knife.
I mean, I could be really anal and say, well, how do you open it?
Let's see.
You have to open the bread first. If you can't get the bread out, how are you gonna spread it out?
Yeah, do you spread it? How do you hold the bread while you spread it?
I've always hated this because your teachers do this to you. It's like, why do I need to do this? Just practice, so I'll just write that down. I just put enter kitchen, go to kitchen shelf, open kitchen shelf, look for bread, grab bread, look for a jar of jelly, grab jelly, look for a jar of peanut butter, grab peanut butter, close kitchen shelf, go to kitchen table, place down the assortment.
So,
objects.
the bag of bread, right? You have to unzip the tie. Don't forget to unzip the tie.
Alright.
You guys have 2 more minutes.
Go back to kitchen shelf, grab a knife, butter knife. Yeah, whatever it's called, a little cubby, I forgot. Acquire it somehow acquire it, and then return it to the kitchen table. And then what you want to do is you want to open up the bag, the bread bag with a little, I don't know what it's called, but you untwirl it, and then you remove 2 pieces of bread. You lay them down flat, and then you go to the 2 jars. You unscrew them by twisting an arc. What is it called? Counterclockwise. And then once you open them, and once they're open, you grab the butter knife, and then you insert it into the peanut butter jar. You grab, but it doesn't know how much to grab. Just stick it in and just take it out, and then whatever it's there, you just apply it to one piece of bread. Using apply it everywhere, and then use the kitchen knife to open a piece of bread, and then put it into the jar of jelly. Just grab the jelly, and then return it to the piece of bread, and then smear it on top. Now you don't need the jar anymore, so place down the butter knife, and then you grab the caps, and then you screw it back on top. And then once those jars are secured,
30
you grab
seconds
the
left.
second piece of bread, and you just place it on top. And then you're done.
While remembering to breathe.
Breathe after every 10 seconds.
Let's assume that instinct is involved. Regurgitate.
Alright, are we ready to go?
Wait, I need to
Alright. And you got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and fingers down? Is that? No. Alright, anyway, can we have a volunteer? What you guys wrote? It doesn't matter if it's not complete, I just want to hear how you guys wrote it down. So any volunteers?
I kind of wrote something down.
Go ahead, that's fine.
They're like in a series of steps from 1 to 2, 3, and 4. The first step is enter kitchen. The second step is to go to the kitchen cabinet where you have all the ingredients. You open the cabinet, and then you search for the bread package. You grab bread package, then you search for the jar of jelly. Grab jar of jelly, then search for the jar of butter, bar of peanut butter. Grab the jar, and then afterwards you close the kitchen cabinet, and then you walk towards the kitchen table where you we're gonna,
Okay.
yeah, and it's just like really explicit, and then I couldn't write anymore. It was just,
Yeah, it's a lot, right?
it was so confusing.
Did you want to volunteer something?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
that's all I could get without going into the basic searching and all that stuff.
Yeah.
First, you have to grab a plate, get 2 knives unless you're gonna go beast and just use 1 knife. Grab the bread, put the plate on the counter, unzip the tie from the bread, take 2 pieces of bread and put them on the plate. Next, open the peanut bar by unscrewing the lid counterclockwise, then do the same for the jelly.
Okay.
Next, take 1 knife, put it in the peanut bar, and remove it at an angle to get some to get some of it. Then spread the peanut butter on the bread until there is a nice smooth layer of it. Next, do the same with your knife by putting it in jelly and removing it at the angle. Then do the same as you did for the peanut butter, except on the other piece of bread. Then you put the 2 pieces of bread together, putting both the peanut butter and jelly together. Then put it to your mouth and enjoy eating, but chew your food.
Alright, very good. Let's give them both of them a round of applause. So, hopefully by now you should realize what I wanted to discuss basically is that as humans, we're going to, well, we're going to say we're going to do one thing, but then in reality, in our heads, we're doing many, many steps ahead of that, right? When we actually grab the jelly, nobody had mentioned grab the jelly with the left hand, grab the lid with the right hand, and twist, right? I mean, it's as simple as that, but it's, you think about it, it's like, okay, grab the bread, grab the jelly, grab the peanut butter. With what, right? Like, you need to grab it, release it, grab it, release it, grab, like, as humans, we've done this millions of times, but as a baby, that's what you do. You learn every single step, and you're gonna fumble. And again, I know I'm taking my time with the programming languages, but I'm assuming you guys don't have any programming experience, and therefore, I have to make this clear. If you forget a step, it will not do what you want it to do. It only does it what you tell it to do. So this would be my version of it. I'm not exactly, like, this would not be the actual, like, it's not running code, but it's very similar to the first example. Like I said, find the person, because nobody said I needed to find the person, right? Like, I'm Mr. Maldonado, so find me at myself, and then find the peanut butter and jelly. How, I don't really care, just find it. And then so on and so forth. And I grab all the necessary utensils, and then I say, the person acting on this, Mr. Maldonado, open bread, jelly, and peanut butter. Again, I don't want to say how to do it. I'm just going to assume that other process knows how to do it. And then I'm going to insert the knife in the jelly. I'm going to stir it, or whatever. And I should have said, like, pick up or whatever. Like, you could do it better. And then release it, see? And then so on and so forth. And what you're looking at right now is, believe it or not, is JavaScript. So it's very legible. If you write the JavaScript in a way that it's easy to read, by using spaces, by using very declarative like names, very descriptive names rather, then it becomes like it becomes like you're reading an English book, if you will. Maldonado, open bread, jelly, peanut butter. Maldonado, insert knife, jelly, stir, release, spread, knife, blah blah blah. And release, pick up bread, eat. Like, you can actually make it very, very readable. But for now, you know, all the magic is assumed to be done elsewhere. So, moving forward, we're going to see a lot of syntax. You're going to see a lot of, in particular, very detailed things. Again, I encourage you to be looking at the slides, because we're going to be doing practices, and I want you guys to go back to the slides. But if you have no prior experience, I can tell you that you will not, I mean, I should not say that, but I don't expect you to get the practice problems. So I encourage you to, after the class today, do Code Academy, do Code HS, do Treehouse, do Khan Academy. Like, the more practice you have, the better. It's like learning French. Literally, the more you practice it, the more better you will be at French. And hopefully I get better at speaking English. The other thing I'm going to suggest is do one thing and run the code. All right? Don't write like all the answers. Like right now we did the peanut butter and jelly. No. I would say do the first thing, which is open the cabinet, and then run that. And then restart it, and then find the jelly, run that, and then so on and so forth. Believe me, you'll see that as we go along. And don't wait to ask a question. There's the forum, codergb.org/forum. It's the Facebook group. We ask people questions, and we also answer them. So and console log, and you'll see what that is in a little bit. And that's it, that you are in charge of learning. Like, you just have to do it. Okay. So even doesn't matter how many hours you're up here presenting to somebody else or you listening. The only way you're going to get this is by writing it down and repeatedly saying it to your head. This is what I'm doing. Now, working with JavaScript, there are three main ways to do it. The first one is to use a script tag inside of HTML. The second one is to use Google Chrome Developer Tools console, and we'll see that in a second. And the third one is to use a JSDiddle or CodePen. And today we'll be using primarily JSDiddle because my buddy wrote it. And, you know, it's actually really nice. So let's actually practice that. If you have a computer with you, you should go ahead and do this. If it's your first time, or you can just skip it, whatever, no big deal. If you don't have a computer, go by near somebody that does actually have it, and either have them help you do it, or just watch them do it. I know it's not great, but until we have, although technically a lot of people have laptops today, that's awesome. But in the future, we'll have some emergency laptops or something, that way you guys can have them. But for now, go to this one, so click on that, and you're going to copy this HTML into that pane, which I'm going to do, escape this, I'm going to copy this. So you have, this is the JSDiddle, by the way. Before moving forward, let me explain what you are seeing. On the left side, you have a bunch of options. I don't think that we're ever going to mess with them today, but you can look into them later. On the top left side, as you can see here, it says HTML. That's the area that we're going to work with right now. The area that I'm currently in, this one, over here on the bottom, this is the JavaScript. So you can actually put JavaScript code in there, and we will in just a second. And you can actually start coding JavaScript in there. The part on the top right, this one, is CSS. And again, we're not going over this, and we're not going over this, but right now we're doing JavaScript. So just temporarily though, I want you guys to go in here and go to the bottom of it, so the bottom of the HTML, and I want you to paste that code in there, and I want you to click on Run. And just again, briefly going over this, Run runs the code. Update actually updates the whole thing. You can save it. You see that it has A3CMCPEXT? Well, when you click on update, it'll actually give you /1, /2, /3, /4. All these versions you can have for yourself. So that's why I said today you don't really need an editor. Just use this. Okay, you don't need any kind of special tool. And you can save it. Save it, and if you have a question on the forum, you can just copy me the URL, and I can look at your code, and I can see what you guys are doing. Okay? So you click on Run, and now if you put your mouse over the HTML, and you didn't see the before of it, so let me put that up. For those that don't have a laptop, the before, nothing happens, right? Now you click on, whoops, gotta actually paste this. So copy paste, Run, and now that you put this in there, you can actually see it moving along as well. And this is called the parallax effect, okay? So you can see it here as well, that it's called parallax. And what you don't see is that I have an external tool called jQuery parallax min.js, and if you were to open that up, you would actually see, like, it would look like gibberish because it's compressed, but it's actually JavaScript. So it took a lot, actually, even though you don't see it, it took a lot to get this done, but I don't have to deal with that. I just have to do this 3 lines of code, if you ignore the jQuery. 3 lines of code that does it for you. And again, we'll eventually see how that works, but right now you're running JavaScript there, and then we're going to try another example. Go to the next slide. And the next slide says to just click on that. And in this example, I have nothing in HTML. I have some CSS, and then I have the results. I forgot to mention that. This is the result right here. So you never mess with this side. It just does what you're telling it to. So you didn't have to paste anything. The code was already here, so I'm going to expand that. And you don't have to understand this code. I don't expect you guys to. But if you wanted to, you can learn how this is done. And I'm doing this with the library called D3. It's a library that displays graphics, that you can do whatever you want with it. So these ears are actually made with JavaScript. And you can see that right here. Teeth, G, transform, blah, blah, blah. I really don't know what they're doing, actually. But anyway, my point is that you are actually creating it. And I think if I see the element inside, Yeah, see, it's actually moving, rotating the element itself. So let me put that over. So there you go. So it's an actual HTML element that is rotating, and it looks very cool. But anyway, you don't have to mess with any of that. This is SVG, by the way, what you're seeing. But yep, that's HTML running. And if you notice, it's running perpetually, forever, because the code is running forever. So we'll see how that is done eventually. And then this one, this is just fun. I wanted to include it because, you know, at Code RGB, we do promote the education for all, but in particular, we want to promote it for women. And this is an example of, I believe, a 15-year-old girl in California or somewhere. I don't know exactly where. And I didn't credit it, my bad. But let me do it right now. It's Hey Girl IO. So if you go to the original code, which I think is here, or no, never mind. Hey Girl IO, it gives you some background about this person, and Catherine Champagne, and she's on Twitter, so you can follow her and say, I love your stuff, or whatever. And what this allows you to do, if you go to the code, if you go to the GitHub one, which you're going to copy all of this, so you can go to raw, and then copy, select all copy, and then you're going to go to the image search result that I provided, just the random one of JavaScript. And then you're going to launch the console. So in Windows, it's Control-Shift-J. In Mac, if you have a Mac, it's Command-Option-J. Do this instead, make it pretty. Always make it pretty. Cool. So yeah, Command-Option-J. So we are in this page, Command-Option-J for me, but Control-Shift-J for you, and you have the console. And you can see that you're in the console by way of this tab. And if it's not shown, there's actually a couple of arrows that will get you here. So at this point in time, you just paste the code that I provided for you and press run, and now all of the images become Ryan Gosling or whatever. Again, not for me and not for you, but I just wanted to give you a heads up that JavaScript took over the website and put in there a bunch of Ryan Gosling. So this person apparently was very, not disturbed, but was upset that the web was so negative all the time. So she felt like sometimes she needed a way to change it into Ryan Gosling, which made her very happy. So she created a little code that would take over all the images in the page. So if she ever gets upset, she just like presses the button and Ryan Gosling everywhere. So it's funny. I mean, and I think even if you click on it, you should get, yeah, well, it goes back, but you get some Ryan Gosling a little bit and then go back to it. But cool, that was it. That was a little practice there. And if you notice, we didn't do anything crazy. We just did the JS fiddle. We even used the Google Chrome to do this, and that was it. So we're ready to go on to the next part. Did anybody see Pizza Guy come in yet? No? All right. So does anybody need bathroom, water break? We still have a lot to go. All right, cool. So we're now at the stage of, here we go. All right, this is the stage of looking at the actual syntax. And I will be talking a lot. So if at any point in time you want to like ask me why, stop me. But after the couple of slides you're going to see, you should understand why the syntax looks that way, or at least how does it look that way, and then look at the statements and data types, etc. We're not going to get into too much detail, and again, I want you to use this as a reference. But yeah, here we go. So the anatomy of JavaScript or any programming language, you have the following: keywords, expressions, conditionals, operators, value, and assignments. Or an assignment is an operator really too, and an expression is a condition as well. It's like tomato, tomato, as well as a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle isn't necessarily a square. These are the jargon, basically. I don't necessarily care that you know these definitions, but again, if you're interested into them, then you can do that. I just wanted to point them out. So, for example, the keyword is any word, and in this case, I'm color coding them for you. So any kind of brownish, reddish color, that's a keyword. Those keywords are required by the language. There's no way around them. Some of them are optional, like this var, it's optional, but for the purpose of this lecture and your development, whenever you define a variable, you always put var. Do me that favor. And whenever you're defining an if statement, there is no option for if. You have to put the if in there. Okay, and we'll go over that in a second. And yeah, let's see. The expressions, I just mean any kind of like overall like thing. Like when you do this equal sign, the left side of it is the expression, left-sided expression. The equals to the right of that is the right-handed expression. So it's very generic. The conditional is anything that returns a Boolean value. So if you don't know what a Boolean is, it's a false or true. That's it, 0 or 1. So in this case, count is equal to 5. Is it equal to 5? So it's asking a question. And at that point in time, is count equals to 5? Well, it really depends. In this case, count is 1. So count is equal to 5? False. Because 1 is not 5. Okay? And let's see. And the operators are, could be the assignment, could be this one, which is the increment by operator. There's really this is a shorthand version of variable equals variable plus done, but well, in this case, it's actually the concatenating operator. But again, any questions on this so far? So what you're going to see in the following slides is on the left side is like a general pattern way that you can think about it. So this says sometimes running code. I think all of them are running code. But if you're going to want to test this, use this code on the right. This should be running code. And if I see something wrong, I can fill in the gaps. But to access any properties or any values inside of objects or inside of any kind of container, like a variable, you can access the variable directly, or if you want to access it, it's what's inside of it. Like in this case, the car has doors. You need to put the dots. Car.doors. Okay. If you don't know, or it's a very complicated key, for example, in this variable, then you need to put the brackets. And I don't have a list. I should have done that, but there's the brackets, the square brackets, and there's a curly brackets, if you will. And we'll see an example of that in a little bit, or you can see it right here. This is a curly brace. This is a colon, in case you don't know. A quote, for me, quote could be single quote, double quote, doesn't really matter, I just call them quotes. And square brackets and parentheses. Again, parentheses are those. Surprised it or not, but there's some people that actually call them something else, so I just want to make sure we have the same vocabulary. Console log. So I wanted to move this up really closely because you're going to be using console log a lot, and I want you to. What console log is an object console, and you're accessing the method log. And you can put in there any expression at all. So in this case, I'm putting in there a function. The second one, I'm putting in there an object, and you haven't seen one yet, but that's what that is. And if you click on that example, you'll get the following. If you are on Chrome or on Google, or if you're on Chrome or on Firefox, then console log is available to you. Oops, there you go, Jay. And so there's a console, and you can see that, again, I can copy this into the console, run it, and you're going to get the output of function. So the log, all it does, it gives you the value so you can look at it. Okay, that's all it does, console log. It's kind of like the print in C, or like the echo in Python. I think it's echo, could be wrong. No, print is Python 1. Anyway, whatever. My point being is you can do interesting things here, and then the console dir or console log, it actually does a similar thing already. Back in the day, it used to be more specific, so console log of a variable, so 1, b, and 2, and it still gives you the output of the object. If you do console dir, there's a bunch of them, and you can see the difference here. Now you can go through the objects manually in there. So there's A and B. If it's too low, I can move it up as well. Just let me know. And I'm just going to run out of real estate. But so anyway, I just want to briefly cover how that looks like, and that's why I went over how to access things. And whenever you call a function, by the way, you always do the parentheses. So the method that you're looking at, and then you pass in, and you separate the arguments, the parameters, by a comma. So, addition, subtraction, multiplication, we're going to use these in a second. They pretty much are what you might think. The addition, to add numbers, you use the plus sign. To subtract, you use the negative. To multiply, you use the asterisk, the number 8 on your keyboard. No X, nothing like that. It has to be the asterisk. And the division is the forward leaning the slash. Not the backwards one, but the forward one. Again, make sure you know that. And you notice that I'm using the parentheses, and the reason for that is, I'll explain it in a second. So simple math. I want everybody to click on this JS Fiddle. I want you guys to actually write code already, believe it or not. I'm going to give you guys 2 minutes, and then we're going to work on it together, just in case you don't have it. So the problem states that I want you to write a JavaScript program, so in this area, to find the area of a triangle where the base is 5 and the height is 10. And in case you forgot, the formula for the area of the triangle is 1/2 the base times the height. And remember, you guys are not calculators. I don't want you to put the 1/2 times 5 times 10. I want you to start thinking as a software developer. You want to use variables. So I'm already telling you here that you need to initialize variables, declare variables, and to initialize them in that area. And then eventually you're going to need to calculate the area. And eventually you're going to have to output the results. Okay? So right now, for the next 2 minutes, I want you guys to be problem solvers. Go back and look at how variables are defined. Here I'm defining a variable. And I haven't talked to you about numbers yet, like number 4, 3, 2, 1, and what that looks like in JavaScript, but I think it's pretty implicit, right? That's a number right there, and it's being used. So let's see. So I'm going to give you guys a couple of minutes. Just going to see how you guys work on your own. If we need to work through all of them together, we can do that. I just want to see if you guys like to work independently or you just like to be handheld, then I can try and hold you guys. So, yeah. How do you get to that? Oh, were you? Yeah. So, if you came in a little late, or let's see. Yeah, I'm gonna do another dual GL real quick. So, do you see that? So go to that page so you can get the presentation for those that didn't make it in time. Oh look, the pizza's here, so good. Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, it's very simple. I mean, it's just for those that haven't started it before. Yeah, exactly. Very good.
For real? What do you think?
I think I need some coffee.
Same. Show me. Door. Yeah, that's the big. Oh, that. Like put multiple of them and then just multiply them out as the objects. Sorry.
Well, you're thinking that someone's
Designating the base and the height.
Well, that's what I'm doing. I'm defining a variable, right?
Yeah, and variable. Like the position, or if I want to add a second key. Okay. Variable.
It's the JavaScript.
Yeah. So we're gonna go ahead and keep going. You guys can keep on eating. So
Let's see. Oh, all right. So it says to initialize the variables, and we see that in our code, this repeats a lot. I know that I'm skipping a lot of steps. Like, this is not a computer science class. Like, I'm going to skip a lot of steps, but in this example, you see it here, you see it again, you see it again. So the pattern seems to be that to define a variable, you always have var, like we talked about. So var, I know I'm going to put it in there, and it's talking about what? The base. So rather than putting B or putting something ridiculous like A, just going to put base. And nothing costs you when you're writing out the actual code. Like, put in there all the spaces that you need, put in there what you're looking for. And it says the value of it is 5. So is 5. Again, when it comes to programming, we're not trying to trick you. We're not trying to make things more complicated than they have to be. Like, I saw one student or one person in the audience try to do an object and like reuse the object. totally cool. You can do that. No big deal. However you want to see the problem and how you want to shape the problem is up to you. I think personally that it should be simpler than that. It should just be, the value 5. So in this example is 5. Simple as that. And I'm using a semicolon at the end, and again, I know it's small, I can make it larger. Semicolon at the end because, again, in all my examples I put a semicolon at the end. And we haven't even talked about that, but the semicolon just means that I'm done. It sometimes is used to separate things, you'll see that in a little bit, but this is the end of it. It's a good delimiter. It delimits the next stage. It's kind of like the period of sentences. So anyway, there's the base, and then the height, we need to do that as well. So base, and fix this. There you go. So the height should be similar, 10. And to calculate the area, again, area is equals to 1/2, so 0.5. I think some of you guys did like this as well, 1/2. You can, like in this case, you just know the decimal point of 1/2 is 0.5, so you just do that. 0.5 times the base times the height. Fairly straightforward. Again, it's more of a practice, but doing this, so Control Shift J, or Command Option J. And that little error is because at the beginning of time you didn't have an area defined. You can just clear it right here. Just clear. And you can run it now. You get 25, like we're expected. Now, I want us to get into the mode, the practice of you write the answer once, like this, and all you're changing is the variables, the inputs, if you will. So in this case, if I wanted to check with the area of 10 base, the height 10, I just have to click on run. I don't change the code, I just change the constants, the input, okay? And your code should run appropriately. So it doesn't matter what kind of input you give it, it should just run. Again, this is talking about proper way of writing code and all this stuff, but the earlier on you know what the objective is on how to write code, the better your code will be in the long run. So I just wanted to go over that. Any questions on how we did this? If you get a different answer by using an object, that's totally fine as well. As long as you get to the area is 25, and when you change it to 10 and 10, 50, that's cool with me too. Alright? So, we're not going to keep doing simple stuff though. We're going to ramp it up. So here's the next one. How much water will fit in an aquarium that is shaped like a box and is 10 inches high and 6 inches wide and 14 inches long? So again, you can click on the link, the practice link. And it's fairly similar to the one before, so it shouldn't take us long to do that. And it says how much will fit, the shape is the following, and the information is the following, and the explanation is right there, and the formula is right there. So pretty much the same, except we have one new variable. Instead of wasting time on this, I'm assuming you guys can just redo this, so I'm just going to do it really quick. The height is 10, the width is 6 inches, so 6, and the length of it is 14. The volume is going to be height times width times length. Have it. Run that, and you should get 840. Again, same thing that we did before, and you can do this at home if you like. And it says to check your answer by changing the width to 10. Kind of like what I just did before. And you should get 1400. Run it, 1400. Okay. And this is again very simple. Just want you guys to get in the groove of creating things. But before we move forward, I'm going to give you guys a tool that I wish I had when I started the code, and that is breakpoints. Anybody know what a breakpoint is? Okay, 2 people, 3 people. Can you tell us what a breakpoint is?
You have your code, and then in the source code, that will be available on your browser. You can put a point, and when the web browser hits that point, it will stop, and then you can pick up from there.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. So you're telling the browser that whenever you encounter this, could be a point in a different programming language, etc., could be a point, you need to stop. Stop anything that you're doing, and I need to see what you're doing. So it stops and you can see all the values and everything that is going on. So right now that you guys are learning how to code, I want you to use this more often than not. And the way that you launch it is by doing Control-Shift-J, Chrome Developer Tools, Command-Option-J, and then you're going to add the word debugger, which wasn't very clear here, but let me fix that. Debugger. And you're going to add the word debugger to the line of code that you're working on, and you're going to click on Run. It has to be in this order. I'll show you why in a second. Or, if you know the source code that you're working with, you can just go to the line number and add a breakpoint there. I'll show you both examples in a little bit. And here's that example. I want you to click on that link, and you're going to get to this JS fiddle. There's going to be a bunch of them, so you can just keep closing them if you'd like. Okay, so here's the JS fiddle. It's a very simple JS fiddle. It's just a sum. And you don't have to know what the code does yet. We haven't gone over the for loop. But this is what the debugger is really good about. If you ever encounter any code that you're not sure what it's doing, use a debugger. So in this case, I'm going to put the debugger at the very top, right here. And I said before, Command-Option-J. There that is. I'm going to do the following though. I'm going to take it out of that box by using that. So now it's freely available. I'm going to run it. And now the website is blocked. I can't do anything to it at all. That is because I'm running the break right now. So just as it was explained, the code went from the top of the page, goes down, and then eventually starts interpreting, right? Interpreting the code, and it's going to get to this keyword, debugger. And the browser is going to stop at that point in time. So on the right side, you have the following. And on the left side, you have the following. Okay. I'm going to switch over to the presentation just so that it's easier to read, in case it's your first time seeing it, which the majority of you guys will. And you have the following information. You have all the files that you have access to on the left side. So CSS files, JavaScript files, they're all there. More than likely, you're not going to mess with this if you're using the debugger keyword. And then eventually in the middle, you have your actual source code that you have worked with. And then on the right side, you have the call stack, the commands, start, stop, resume, etc. We'll see those in a little bit. And then you have the actual variables, what their values are at that moment in time. In our example, it doesn't look exactly like this because I decided to move the debugger in a different location. You can see that the buffer is nothing, is undefined, I is undefined, and so on. But when you start playing it, and I'm going to talk about these buttons in a little bit, you can actually start seeing them change. So the buffer now is 0, and you can see that value in there, and so on. And then when you go into the loop, you start seeing those values as well. And then you iterate a couple of times, and you can actually see the code, the values of the code changing. So I'm going to go back to this, and I'm going to talk about really quickly the controls that I was just using. So the first one is the resume button. You're going to use that button mostly. And this does is when you press it, it'll go to the next breakpoint. So you can have more than one. There's nothing stopping you from having a bunch of debuggers if you just wanted to get to specific parts of your code. And this will jump to the next one. If it doesn't see anything anymore, right, it keeps going down the lines, then that's it. It just runs, and it runs normally as if you didn't have any debuggers. If you use this one, it looks at the current line that you're looking at, and it skips to the next one. I don't use this one as often as I should, I guess, but the one that you need to tattoo to your arm and to just remember is that one, the third one. This is the step into. I call it the step down, or go to the next one, or whatever. Like this is the one that I'm talking about. This is the one that you should use. Like it should be green, in my opinion. And what this does is, if you're at this point in the line, when you press that button, you're going to go to the next one. You're going to go to the next one, and you're going to go through every single expression, every single thing that the computer does, and you will get every one of them. So that's why I want you to use it, especially right now that you guys are getting started. If at any point in time you get lost, you don't know where you're at, you have two options. You can hold on to this blue button and then press the play button, so that will disable the breakpoints temporarily. and then you can rerun it again to get to a breakpoint, or you can hit the step out button. This allows you to pull yourself out of wherever you're at, and that way you can be one away from it. And you'll see why that might be useful in a little bit. And the cost stack. So we haven't really talked about the cost stack yet, and the reason for that is because you guys are just getting started. But I want to briefly go over it because it's the same example as we had before, but this time though I have a function here. So I have the average function, and it calls another function called sum. So sum of the input divided by the input length, and we'll go over those in a little bit. And so this is going to call the other function. And again, we don't know what functions are, but just bear with me. I'm going to create a debugger right here, debugger. And again, you can arbitrarily put wherever you want them. I'm going to run this. And now you can see the cost stack on the right. It says sum, average, and Windows on load. And what that states is the progression, where your code is coming from. Right now, this is only 3 of them, but in the future, when you're really programming, you're going to see that there's a lot, actually. Like I've seen one that is like 50 stacks full. So that means that you have one function, then another function, another function, another function, and you just keep calling another function until you get to where you're at. So this is really helpful, and I just wanted to point it out for you guys, because you can actually click on each one of these, and it'll jump back and forth between where you're at. So it's really cool. I wish I would have had this earlier on. Let's see. At this point, yeah, okay. So briefly, I just want to go over what you're looking at here. This orangey color or whatever, that is the current value at that time. This blue line right here is the current line that is being executed. The part in blue is what's going to be executed. So let me show you that example. Next one, using the third one, the step into. So you can see that I'm looking at this line, and this expression, all of this, is going to be evaluated the moment that I press the next one. You can see that right now, before I do anything, the buffer is 0, and I can check that by putting my mouse over it. 0. Again, this is a great tool. You can actually know what input of I is. You can see it here, input of I, or input rather, and then I as well. But if you don't know what this does, just select it. Select it. And you can barely see it on my screen, but that is selected using the mouse. And then when I put my mouse over it, it actually tells you the answer. So you can already start inferring what the code does. You can infer that doing input of I, which I is, just putting the mouse over the I, selecting it, I is 0. So you as a human, substitute with me, input bracket 0, that's going to grab the value 0, the item 0, from the input. So this one right here. I know it's not very clear because it's like the contract example, but let me do it this way. Let me step. And then eventually you have the input change to -1, 0, 1. And then you're going to get to the buffer 0, like we saw before. And then the input of I, which is the input of 0, is -1. Okay, so the 0th item is -1. That's how you get it. So without even you guys looking at how arrays work, you can already start using code that is pre-existing, and you can already start inferring and learning how the code works. The browser will do the code. Just observe what it does. This is what that tool does. So I know that I learned by watching others, and so this is one great way of just watching either your own code or watching other code that is out there, how it works. And trust me, you're going to learn very quickly. So before we get into all this mess that we just did here, I wanted to just briefly go over these parentheses that are right there. These parentheses help you by grouping. So jump back. And this is more readable, the part on the bottom, above, than the part on the bottom. That is much more readable. You can clearly tell that the first thing that gets done is the plus, the next thing that gets done is the multiplication, and then the last thing gets done is the comparison. If you didn't have the parentheses, then you would have to rely on, what is the math thing called, that shortcut? Huh?
Order of operations.
Yeah, the order of operations
Does.
and pandas, yeah. I don't want to remember that really. I mean, just do the damn parentheses and you'll be fine. Just keep that in mind. You can even do it for here, like I said. I'm showing you here that the order of operations in this case is 5 less than 10. I want that done first, and then 1 less than 10. I want that next, and then compare the two. And if you haven't seen logical operators, has anybody not seen that before? You good? All right. So in this case, you know that an AND operation only is true when both sides are true, and the OR operation is true when either side is true. So keep that in mind. And again, very straightforward. There's variable declarations, and that's how you start using the conditions. The equality operations, this is the strict equality operations. That means that both sides have to be exactly the same. Like if this was a string and this was a number, then it doesn't matter if it's the same number, it won't equate. But anyway. And you can see I can use a complicated expression here. I'm calling a function, and the result of the function will be compared to 15. So, and you get the result of that. Notice again that I'm using the grouping, the parentheses, to just make it easier on my eyes, right? Make it easier on my eyes, and I'm expecting one value out of this. And not equal is the opposite of that, obviously. Now, that's not the only time that we use the not operation. I implore you not to use it unwisely. I want you to use it when it's wise and to do it. So in this case, the opposite of 0 less than 1 is 0 less than 1, yes. The opposite of that is false. So I hate keeping track of things. So instead of saying, is your age less than 18 and the not of that, so are you an adult? You could just say, well, is your age greater than 17? Again, sometimes you want to use a not, and I think I have an example soon of what that is, but the majority of the times I guarantee you can do the opposite, just writing it out without the not, and it just makes things easier because you have to do the opposite of something. These are comments, so every single programming language has comments, and the reason for them are simple. I forget things. The developer that writes things down, you easily forget. So sometimes you write a piece of code, like a formula, and you're like, okay, it has to be the pi times 4.987. What is 4.987? Who knows? So what you do is you write a comment that says 4.987 is my favorite number, so we're going to use that. So next time that you see the code, you're like, okay, don't mess with that 4.988. And you can also use comments to block out code. Sometimes you don't want code run because you realize that's bad code and you wanted to put a comment that says don't run this code ever again for the love of God. You can do that. There's actually a website that goes through like crazy comments of people, and it's a fun read. I know that we've used profanity sometimes of like, I really hate you, Internet Explorer, fill in the profanity for me. And yeah, it's fun to go back like 5 years later and you're like, oh my god, yeah, I remember this stupid thing. The if statements. Okay, so what you saw before were pretty much, simple multiplication, division, blah, blah, blah. Now we're getting into where the computer is making a decision, or rather it's making a decision for you. So here the decision is, if the condition is true, then run the expression. So in my example, and this one is a non-working example, but whatever. If my age is greater than 12 and my age is less than 17, then I'm going to group you as a teenager. If my age at the time was 10, then that line of code would never run. It's as if it was gone. Again, if this is your first time seeing a programming code, programming language, then this should be, okay, you need to make that like as a I believe button kind of thing. It's going to happen like that. Now, what if you wanted to do it otherwise? Like, if this, then do that, but otherwise, what do I do? This is the else statement, basically, the if and else. You do this if this is true, you do this if this is false. So in this example, if I put 10, my age is 10, then that means that I'm going to run this code. If my age is 14, then this code runs, and this never runs. It's one or the other, but never both. So It's very important that you realize the fundamental benefit of this, because when you're making decisions, you don't want to do, well, if this and this, or this and this and that. You want to just say, you do this or this. It makes it easy for you to control things. And yeah, I mean, it's simple as that. Just using the if and else statement, you can do really interesting things like Boolean logics, Boolean trees. I implore you to do that on your own time, but this is going to be paramount for things that are going on in the future. The while loop. I rarely use the while loop. I'm not a big fan, but you can encounter it sometimes in other people's codes, and this is how it works. It's similar like the if statement that you see. It's the same curly braces, the same parentheses, but we're using the keyword while in this case. And the condition here, what it does is that every single time that it loops back to the top, it's going to check the condition. So the variable, it's usually a variable in there. And if the condition or the variable is true, then it runs it again. And believe me, that it's very common that your code sometimes gets stuck in this loop. It's called the runaway loop. When this is true, and it's always true, your computer will just try, go. And because it never changes condition, it never goes to false, it just goes on forever. And your code is lost. You have to refresh the website. Trust me, you don't want to do that. People complain. Like, I saw Facebook do that once, and I was just like, really? Anyway, so this always run, and you have two ways of canceling the loop. Changing the expression to false, or using the break keyword. So, I'm done what I need to do, give me a break. Break out of it. And you just get out of it, and you go to the next line down here. So in this example, I have done is false, and the opposite of that is true. So this is true, so this is going to run. If the count is greater than 10, which it's not right now, then do that. So in this case, I'm not going to run that. And it says count plus plus. We haven't seen this before, but count plus plus means count is equal to the count plus 1. So count is 0, so that means 0 plus 1 is 1. So the new count will be 1. So that's 1. Next time that this runs around to the back, it's going to check, is 1 greater than 10? No. So it's going to run the next one, and it's going to say 2. 1 plus 1 equals 2, so it's going to put 2 into the count. It's going to keep doing this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 10. And at this point, it's going to say, is 10 greater than 10? And the answer to that is 10 greater than 10? Yeah, false. So 10 is greater than 10, and this is false, so this is going to run. Done is true, so it's going to come down here, it's going to increment the count again, so it's going to be 10 plus 1, 11. It's going to go to the top, and it's going to say, is the not of true, what is the not of true? So that's false, so it's going to end this when I see console log of the limit. Again, that's why I don't like the not, because of the whole, the not of true, like why would you do that, but anyway. So that's a while loop. I really don't like it because it's so easy to end up in the like forever cyclical thing. So what they did is they invented the for loop. And I encourage you guys to prefer to use the for loop. And it's really simple, really, but I know people get confused on how to set it up. So you initiate it, you write a condition, like and, or, less than, greater than, whatever you want the condition to be. And you increment. So the reason you increment is that usually the condition stops somewhere. Usually for loops, you go from 0 to whatever you're interested in, and you stop at that point. So in this example, you're incrementing by 1. Remember, count is equal to the count plus 1. So in this example, does exactly the same that the other one did, this other while loop here, but it's going to go, I mean, to me this is easier to read, right? It goes from 0 to 10, and then I'm going to include 10. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And if I was to output the result of this, you would get 11. The reason for that is, before it goes to the top and it checks the condition, it has to increment it by 1. And that makes sense because it'd be 11 less than or equal to 10, false. So then 11. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can use the debugger and you can try it yourself out now that you know how to work with the debugger. So, practice. Let's see. I think this one might be a little heavy-handed, but I'm going to give you guys a moment to absorb all the code. If you can't get this problem on your own, then that's cool. Don't worry about it. We're going to work through it, but I want you guys to give you some time to maybe try it on your own. And I want you to do the console log. Like, I want you to see if you actually get it out, like the answer that you're expecting here. So what the problem says is I want you to write a for loop that goes from 1 to 11 and increments it by 2. So see, that's different from the example that we saw before. So I want to see you do console log 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. And remember, be careful of the endless loop. If you see an endless loop, like you can't move it, it'll be very obvious. So I want you to write that loop, and I want you to output it. Okay? Time is it 9 o'clock? We have 10, 20 more. Most of the other ones are just exercises, though. There's a couple of slides on syntax and some best practices. Yeah. Okay. This. And you guys let me know. If you just want me to code, I can code, or I can skip the practice. It's up to you guys. If you want to go or whatever, just let me know. Or we can just keep going.
What? Plus, add extra number, or do we have to actually add?
Yeah, it won't be like that.
No.
You need to
actually
do,
plus it or not?
you should do the following. Like say, if you're using the variable I don't know what you're using for the loop, but if you're using the variable I, you should do I is equal to I, the old I, plus 2. So that, yeah. So we know how to write a for loop, so I'm going to just start you off. I'm not going to give you the answer, but I'm going to say that this one, say if you're using I, it should be I plus 2. Right? Like this is the equivalent of that other one. And by the way, if you're fancy pants, you can actually do this. Plus equals 2. If you want to be fancy pants. And I'm going to give you guys 1 more minute. Again, just no worries if you don't do it. No big deal. Really just, it's more the practice than anything. And inside of this, you would do console log alive. Again, I don't want to make it too difficult. Remember to use the debugger if you get stuck somewhere. And again, you should try your code by doing Command J or whatever, the Control Shift J. And I want you to run the code. If you run this code, as I have it right now, you're going to get a syntax error or a reference error. Yeah, that's normal.
So you can input information onto it. Well, you ran it, obviously, there's nothing on it.
No, there's, go back to the loop.
I'll leave it. Let's see. Yeah, you're close. It says it started at 1 though, right?
Yeah.
So you just change that to 1. Yeah.
Alright, so for bar count equals.
Very good. And run that. Yeah, you need to do 1 up. There you go. Very good.
That's not a variable, is it?
Yeah, this is where like a classroom management software would be helpful. Like I'm gonna borrow your computer. Let's show it up there. And then let me take over. Let me show you what I do. So for that.
I agree that you
Hmm? Yeah, I don't like it either. I really hate do whiles. Have you ever seen the do whiles?
Oh yeah.
Or yeah.
Do it once and then,
Those get very
do it once and then
Yeah. Alright, we're going to continue just for the sake of time. It's already 9 o'clock, so So the result here would be, you can use I 0, it doesn't matter which one you use. And then I is less than equals 11. And again, by all means, add the debugger, run it. And, okay, so this is where, it's kind of funny, right? Like, I wrote the code, but then it shows the old version of it. Why is that? This is the thing with JS Fiddle. And what it does, it actually creates the index for you, the index HTML, you know, the actual website. And then it allows you to run the website in the background. But the thing is that the developer tools kind of caches, you know, it grabs the code the first time it gets ever run. So the solution for this, if you want to see your actual code, is to close it, copy it, I know it's annoying, reload it, and paste it. And now, Control-Shift-J, Control-Shift-J, and you run it, and it should be your code. It is, yes. So anyway, at this point in time, you can check your code, and you go to the next one, you can, because of the console log. Again, you would do out, and you would get to this, and then go to down. I'm gonna just do the resume like this. So you can see the I is 2, 4, 6, oops, I started with 0, should have been 1. But anyway, you can see that it goes up to 10, but I can fix that just as somebody else did as I. This should have been 1, and you can see the results. Let me get rid of this debugger, and then run it, run that. And you can see that you go from 1 to 3, 5, 7, 9, and I didn't include 11. Inclusive, greater than or equal to 11. So even the teacher makes mistakes. Okay. Again, just getting you guys warmed up on how to use for loops. And let's see. And you can use the for loop to do this following problem. And this is a much more complicated problem. It's going to involve some math. I'm going to work through the problem over here by hand, and then I'm going to leave it to you guys to do the problem on the computer. So it says that Marita puts $4,000 in a savings account, so $4,000. And so $4,000. And that's the principal. And at an interest rate of 5.5%. So annual interest is equals to 5.5%. And right now this is not even code, it's just writing it out. And how much will the interest have earned in 1 year? Well, the interest earned formula earned is equals to the principal or the balance times the rate. I'm trying to figure out if I should work through all the problem or not, but whatever. So if you look at January, just look at the January, you can see that 4,000 times 5.5%, which is 0.055, divided by 12, because this is a monthly. And you're going to get, oh boy, what is it? 1438? 18? 18 what? Okay. 4,000 minus 0.055 divided by 12. Yeah, 1833, thank you. 1833. And then if I do February, here's the thing that it's going to get you. February, it's not 4,000. It's going to be what? 1833? Right, because you need to add the balance. So the new balance, the new principal, is equals to the old principal plus the rate, or sorry, the earned interest. So that's why you get this, because it's going to be 4,000 plus 1833. And so you're going to get 4,000, 1833 times, and the same thing, 0.55 divided by 12. And you're going to get 1842. And then March.
Yeah, but you
is going to be 40, 36, 75 times 0.055 divided by 12, and it's going to be 1850. I could be wrong. Okay. Alright, so that, I did this before. Yeah, no, not a sponsor or something like that, no. But anyway, it's always good to do things by hand. I know that when it comes to web development, we don't do these kinds of problems, but it's a great problem on how to do JavaScript. So, right now, I could keep doing this. I did this once, twice, 3 times. You can probably see where I'm going with this. And the only thing that changed out of this is this, right? So this changed, that changed, that changed. And then you got this answer, these answers. And then you notice that we had to use this here, the answer here, we had to use it to come up with the new principal bounds. So you can kind of start seeing maybe the pattern of what you're going to end up doing. Because you want to keep doing this until you get to the 12th month. Because you want to see how much you earned after the year. And I don't want to do this by hand. Because imagine if you did this 5 years, 20 years, 30 years. Yeah. So this is where programming comes in. So we're going to see that. And due to the interest of time, I'm just going to show you guys the answer. I know you guys can ignore me up here. You can just do it on your own. But here's what I would do. Alright. So here's the link to the practice. Like I said, you guys can redo the problem at home so you guys can try it. And I'm already providing you guys all the variables, so you don't have to declare the variables. They're provided to you already. And we know that when we do things repeatedly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we're using a loop, right? We do things iteratively in a loop, so we're going to do that. For variable month is 1. First month, January being 1. This is just helping myself. And the month is less than or equal to 12 months. And the month is every single month. And by the way, since I did this by hand and I did the first 3 months, I'm just going to make my life a little bit easier. I'm just going to put, instead of 12, I'm going to put 3. Right? That way you can test the code. And I'm going to say that the principal, well first let me calculate the earned interest. Earned interest is equal to the principal, right? So that 4,000 that is there, multiplied by the annual rate, divided by 12. And I'm going to expand this. And if you notice, we did the same thing that we did here. Like we haven't invented anything new. The principal times the annual divided by 12. We're just using variables right now. That's the earned interest. Now, we're not done though, because we know that we need to add to the principal the earned interest. So all we have to do is principal is equal to the principal plus the earned interest. Again, nothing new, we did that before. And by the way, you guys can do console log the earned interest. And you can do console log the principal. And at this point in time, I'm not actually pretty sure if I'm done or not, so I'm just going to run this as it is. So I'm going to run that, and hey, this is not bad. So you can see here that the first month, the earned interest is 1833, which is what we have here. Second month, so the second loop that we go around, the earned interest is 1842, and the third month is 1850. And I know I didn't calculate the third principal, but it would be 40, 55, yeah, 25. So right now, I know that my code is functioning like I should, and by the way, we can always do debugger and double check my stuff. I'm going to add this 12 in here, and run that. And I can see that the last thing that I have, the last thing that I have here, oops, yeah, the last one I have is 4,022.25. So if I wanted to know what the earned interest for the year, this is probably not the best way to write it, but I can just subtract 4,000 from it. and result of that is $225.53. So this is how you start using JavaScript in actual development. You start off with a problem. In this case, it was a financial problem, and it's really mundane. And by the way, they don't do it by month. They actually do this calculation by date. So, yeah. So it's not so bad though, right? Like, the divided by 12 is going to be a little tricky because of leap years, not leap years. How do you do that? And then the other thing you need to keep an eye out for is like there's a leap second now. So what do you do with that? Financial institutions, they have to worry about this kind of stuff, believe it or not. But that's how the consultants get paid the big bucks, because they have to keep track of every single detail. So anyway, so that's a for loop. Let's see what else we got. Times table. I'm going to skip this one, but it's already done, I believe. I just wanted you guys to get practice using the debugger. So if you were to run this, you would get to the answer here, which is a times table that goes from 1 through 9 and the 1 to 10. So 9 times 10, that's 90. So how did the code do this? I'll leave it to you guys to use the debugger. And just really quickly, you can see that working right here. Debugger, run the code, run that, and you can press the down, and you can start seeing how the code changes, how the columns get added one at a time, and then eventually the table, this variable right here, it gets a new item right there. And you can actually see the table items by going through them, and you can see it's the ones that we calculated before. So you can review the code, see how this works. Due to time, I'm just going to keep going, but it's fairly straightforward code. You can see it's doing the times table for each one, and it's borrowing the counts that we were using, the row and the columns. Okay, so I'll leave that to you guys. Any questions though? Alright, so an array. The reason I separated this from the rest of the stuff that we've been doing is because an array and an object, which you'll see in a second, they are the best parts of JavaScript and they are the worst parts of JavaScript. If you did Java, if you did C++, then you have to use a template to create an array or a list of a bunch of similar, like-minded, or like similar items. So in this example, I have a bunch of strings, so John, Sam, and Bob. Well, I can actually mix and match it inside of JavaScript. There's nothing preventing me, so I'm just going to do this real quick so I can show you the example. There's nothing preventing me from doing the following. I'm going to clear this. I'm going to create a variable list of bag of tricks, I don't know. And I can start off by 0, 1, 2, but then I can do function. I can do a boolean, so false. I can do undefined, really, if I wanted to. And then I can even do a date time as well. And when I run that and see what the bag of tricks is, it actually has every single one of those things inside of it. It's ridiculous. JavaScript doesn't care. It's one of the coolest things about the language, but also the most annoying. So just keep that in mind, is that just because I have strings here doesn't mean that they have to be strings. I'm going to have an array of arrays, and then strings of arrays, and so on and so forth. It's ridiculously awesome, but annoying for people that are starting out. And that's one thing. And they're always annotated by the brackets, square brackets, and each of the items are separated by a comma. Usually in JavaScript, anything that is separated by a comma. To access any of the elements, you have to keep this in mind. They are indexed by 0. What does that mean? Is that if I want the first element, the first item, and I do that a lot, by the way, I say element item, because in my world I use a lot of elements inside of the arrays, but for now, the first element, the first item, you don't use the 1, you use the 0. Indexed by 0. So in this case, if I wanted to get to Bob, what is the number that I should use?
2.
Yeah, very good. 2. So you would do list brackets 2. Again, brackets. You have to use the brackets to access things. We saw that in the first slide that we saw. And then You can loop through every single item, and here's a keyword, or the key point. You need to use the list length. We haven't talked about dot length. We haven't talked about anything like this, but dot length is a built-in property. It doesn't matter if you have 0 items, 100 items, or 1 item and then you add 1 to the items in it. The dot length will always have the number of items inside the array. Okay? So that's why you can loop through 0 to the length, right? You can go from 0 and then 1 and then 2. Right? You can go through every single one of them. Or you can do this built-in function. It's only for those that are really curious about it. This built-in function, you pass it an anonymous function. We haven't seen a function yet, but this is a function. And when the function gets called, you will get passed in there a value in the index. I said a lot, but you can give it a shot, and it actually is working code on the right. So again, built-in function, the built-in variable is length list length. And we're going to use this to compute the average of the score. And again, I'm going to skip this just because, well, not skip it, but I'm going to give you guys the answer due to time, and it goes like this. Well, just briefly, let me answer the question over here, so you can see the real world and the coding world. And I like to do this because I think a lot of times people think that coding is something that, I don't know, it just comes to you. But if you just break down the problem to each individual step that you do, you realize that there is nothing magic about programming. It's just it's just textualizing what you guys are doing. So the average is, or mean, so the average or mean is equals to what? Sum of all numbers. Yeah, the count, right? The count of all numbers. Okay, and in this case you have what? 5.2, 5.6, 5.6, keep going?
4.5.
5.2 divided by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thank you. So that is 25.5 divided by 5. And yes, I've done this before. 5.1. Yeah. So anyway, we've done this before, and I just want to point this out. Okay. When they taught you this in math, they weren't being kind to you guys. They just told you do this. Okay, that's it. But if you think about it, what you're doing is the following. You're looking at this number, and you're adding it to this number. And then you're going to this number, and you're adding it to that number, and so on and so forth. Right? You're doing that. And then eventually you're going to divide by 5. So, by now you should start seeing a pattern, right? This number in the array of 5.2, 5.6, so on and so forth, that number is going to be the score. I'm going to say this is the scores. So variable, var, right? The variable scores. This is going to be the 0th item. This is going to be the first item. And then eventually this will be the, I don't know, how many do we have? 5, so that's going to be the 4th. Thank you. So, right? So you should have that in mind. And then we know that the length of all arrays, we know them already, so you can just do scores dot length. Right? The length is the counts. And we'll see that in action just a little bit. So again, if you break down the problem, you think about it really well, you can already start seeing the code develop itself. And we're going to do that. Whenever, by the way, again, keep in mind that whenever you go from 0, 1, 2, all the way to a finite number, we're using a loop, a for loop. So, we're going to do that to answer this question. Go down here, initialize the variables. The scores is equal to, here are the scores. Go in here, create the variable, and you notice I just created the brackets, copy-pasted the numbers. JavaScript makes it easy. And then to calculate the mean, average, I need to do a for loop because we decided that we're going to go through every single score. So variable of I, the I is for index. I is less than the scores, dot length. Again, if this is not clear why I need to use the less than scores length, do the debugger, you'll find that, oh yeah, this makes sense. Because the length will always be the length of it, so that's 5, and it will never be, you never access the fifth element, which is a great movie, by the way. So now I'm going through, at this point in time, I can actually go through every single score, so I'm going to do that. Scores of I. Okay, scores of I. And I can see the scores, so just so that you can see that I'm not lying to you. Whoa. I'm not lying to you guys. And run that. You have all the scores, right? And now I know that based on the fact that I need to sum them all up, I'm just going to create a variable. Sum is equal to 0. And I start at 0 because it's a neutral number, right? I don't want to start with an offset. And I'm going to do something with that. So the sum is equal to whatever the sum is, or scores of I, or sorry, I already have the score, plus the sum. And it doesn't matter which order I do it. For me, I just usually think this way. And I can see what the sum is as I do it, so sum. Again, you'll notice that I'm practicing, you do one thing and then you run it again. And wrong one. There it is, 25.5. So I already have the numerator. Yeah, the numerator, 25.5. So now I just need to do the calculation. The mean is the sum divided by the count, which in this case is the scores length. You run that, and you should get 5.1, which you do. Okay? Now, here's where I could trip you up. Because some people would like maybe put in a fixed number in there, like for the scores length, maybe you put in there 5, right? No big deal, run that. You're going to end up with the 5.1 still, pretty cool. But what if I ask you to add a number in there, like 6 at the end? You run it, and it won't work. It'll give you the wrong answer. The reason for that is because it's not grabbing the 6. That's why you do scores.length. Remember what I said earlier on? You want to start learning how to code so that it's flexible. There's the real answer, 5.25. Just keep that in mind, is that real world will always trip you up. If you want to write code, it doesn't matter what kind of input you get to it, it'll always just do what you tell it to do. And if you recall, we already saw an example of this before, but I think I closed it down, but whatever. Alright, any questions on that? Hopefully, by now you should start seeing a pattern of, if you write it down, and then you start thinking about how to do the equivalent in code, you can solve really anything. Now, objects. We kind of started using objects at the beginning. This is, again, one of the best things, one of the worst things about JavaScript. I personally find them incredibly awesome, but at the same time, they can be quite annoying for people who are starting out. First things first, this is how you define a function. var, like we've seen before. The name of the variable, object in this case. I know I use contract examples, but objects. And then equals, and you use curly braces. You use a curly brace, so instead of a square bracket, this is a curly brace. And you have a key and a value pair, key value. In this case, I use property as a key, but whatever, you have a key and a value. And you separate any of the pairs by commas. Again, similar to how we have it with the arrays. One gotcha, okay, this is a JavaScript thing. It's not on you guys, it's a JavaScript thing. But if you put a comma right here at the end, so separating the first two pairs, and then going to the next one right here, this comma, you put one there, it'll actually break things. I don't know why. I know why, but I don't know why that's like in the early stages of Internet Explorer, and yeah, I think even today they still complain about it. It's still going to mess you up, so just keep that in mind. That's one gotcha that you have to just don't put a comma at the last pair. Just do me that favor. Now, we've seen this before. To access a property, we put dot in the property, but that's if and only if you know the property. So if I know exactly which one I'm looking for, you can do that. Dot property. If I don't know what I'm looking for, or it's very complicated, because you can actually put spaces in that. Like you can do quotes, hey, hello there, how you been, blah, blah, quotes, and you can put that in there and it'll actually get you out. Basically, it's literally a key. You can put in there whatever you want as long as you can access it back, then you can access it. Now, here's a gotcha though, is that some people try to use for loops to get to this, and you do use a for loop, but you don't use a for loop, you use a for in loop. So again, the keyword in is important. The reason for that is, remember from the arrays, to access an array, you need to pass it a number, so the index. Well, with an object, you don't pass it an object, a number, you pass it in there, the actual key to get to that value. So because of that, we needed another loop called the for in loop that you need to look into the property. Like, they will actually give you the keys out. Otherwise, you can't take a guess out of it. It could be any kind of key. So you needed this mechanism that does this for you. And you can see the example really quickly, just so you can believe me that, or what it's doing. And then there's the result. So object, property, and key, console log the actual, I put property here, but it could be anything. This is a variable, so key, and key, and run this, and you still get property and key. If I wanted to see the value of it, I just have to do object and pass the key, and run that. And again, you would see property value, key value. I know I'm hammering it in, but you're going to see an example of this usage right now. This chart shows the actual predicted gasoline sales for 1 year, and as humans, we know that the answer to this question is, what's the greatest difference between the predicted and the actual gasoline sales? We know that it's supposed to be which month? September, right? Huge gap between the actual and the predicted. And we did that just very visually, just by quickly finding it. But again, what if I didn't give you 12 months? What if I gave you 100 months? And what if I didn't give you such a pretty graph? What if it was this much apart from between two of them? Like in this one, which one is larger, April or May? The difference, right? A computer is really good at comparing pixels and pixels. Our eyes are not. So this is why programming is so valuable. So in this example, again, walking through the example, you have the following information. And I took the, what the heck? That's weird. Refresh it. Okay, there we go. So I took the actual numbers. I helped you guys out by taking the actual numbers. And we needed to compare the difference. So the difference, again, I would walk through it, but hopefully by now you should realize we're going to do a for in loop, because we need to get to the keys and the values of them. And then we need to compare the values and keep track of the largest one. And let me see, show of hands. Move on or do it? Raise your hand if you want me to do it, or keep it down if you're like, I really want to go. Alright?
Just do it.
Just do it, alright, fine. So let me just do it real quick instead of, because I wanted to do by hand and everything, but no. So variable month in the object records, and again, I can see what this is. Run, whoops, and then run that, and there you go, the different months are right there, so you can see each month those are coming out. And right now, I need to start grabbing the actual data. So the data that I see there is records of the month, and right now I'm interested in the difference. So the difference is, and this is math, absolute value, because I'm only interested in the magnitude, and that's going to be the data actual minus the data predicted. Again, a little bit of math, but I would have explained it over there. You guys want me to move fast? So right now I can actually display this difference of that and run it. And run one. And you can see that if I as a human keep track of it, then I can see that September has the largest one just by comparing it. But I don't want to do that. I want to keep track of it myself, so I'm going to say biggest difference or largest difference, doesn't matter. Largest difference, oh yeah, max, good, yeah, that's better. Me gusta. Max equals 0. So I'm going to say if the difference is greater than the max, so greater than 0, the beginning one, then I need to do something. I need to keep track of it. So I'm going to say that the max now is the difference, the current one. So if I receive 1, then that becomes the max. And then I need to update my month with largest difference is equal to the current month. Now, if I output the results, you should see September at the end. I do. Again, if you don't know how that looks like, you can do console log, the max and the month with largest difference. I chose the longest possible name, and then run that, and you can actually see it goes February, and then it eventually goes to September is the largest one. September. So pretty cool. And that's the answer to that. So if I was to change this code, say, or rather the data itself, and say that September shouldn't be the largest one, so I'm going to put 62, so just null it out, and run it, the largest month after that is November. Notice that I just changed the input, I didn't care about the output, or the actual calculations. That's how your code should be. Okay. Keep going. Subset of an object, I'll leave that to you guys. Use the debugger for that one. What's really cool about that one is that you're doing a loop and then also a loop within a loop using a for loop. I'll leave it as practice. Functions. We've been talking about functions all these times, but here we go. Again, one of the best things and worst things about JavaScript is functions. Functions can be assigned to variables. Functions can be passed as a variable, as a parameter. Functions can be called on themselves all the time. It's really, really cool. You can even just do a whole talk on functions of a function, whatever. But for now, this is how you define it. Generally, you put var method. You can do it this way as well, but in this class, I want you guys to do it this way. Okay? You'll understand why eventually, but variable method, function, and then you put in the arguments. I call them arguments, some other people call them parameters, some other people call them inputs. I like arguments, because, whatever. So arguments, and then I put whatever I want to code in there, and then I need to return. Usually you return something with a function. You can actually do some kind of work on it, like on whatever you're doing, and sometimes you don't have to return something. But in the majority of the times, you're going to return something. So just submit it. So when you return, just FYI, the function stops at that point. Like, at the moment that the program sees return, that's it. It just returns it. Okay? It doesn't matter if you have code afterwards. Doesn't matter. It's going to return. Keep that in mind. So this example, I have the log, and I have the area, and this is one of these special arguments ones, but I'm not going to go over it. But you can see here how you call the log and the area, and you get a nice little fancy thing coming out of there. That's running code as well.
Can you return more than one value?
So, no. The way you would do that, however, is the following. I'm going to clean this up. Well, actually, let me do this. The next problem was asking for the following. It was saying create a function that takes two variables and compares them and returns the minimum. So in this case, I'm going to create a function called minimum, and it's going to take in a variable A and variable B. In this case, I really don't care about the name of it because it's just comparing it. And find the minimum. How would you do that? Yeah, which one's less? So if A is less than B, return A. Oops, return A. And just to make it pretty, return else, return B. That's it. Very simple function to write. And you were asking how do you return more than once? Well, technically you could do the following. What if the function said, so copy this, and I'm going to create another function that says minimum order by size or whatever. So it's going to, if A is this and this, then I'm going to do A and B, and I'm going to return B and A. See what I just did? So order by size just basically sorts it, right? And I only have two options here, A and B. So now, I can't return A and B at the same time, but I can always return an array. See that? I just created an array, and now it's sorted. The first one is always going to be the smallest one, and the second one is always going to be this. So the way that we do this is, like at Google, we did a constant called smallest, and put 0, and then the larger one is 1. So whenever we use the result of this, so order by size, and we pass in there, I don't know, -1 and 4 or 2, whatever. So now we can say, okay, the smallest one is ordered, smallest, and I can also get the largest one. And again, this is easier to read than if you did ordered 0 and ordered 1, right? Because in the future, you won't know what the 0 is or the 1 is. But if you write a variable called largest and smallest, you can read it off of your code. Okay, I'm getting the smallest one from wherever that is. And even in the future, if I decide to switch this, I just switch these two numbers backwards, and the code still works. Again, I'm showing you guys in the future what coding actually is like all about, but whatever. Whew, almost there. And yeah, this is a review of the syntax, which is you do this, and it could be any of the strings. We talked about that already. There could be anything. And if you notice, it says this is an array, and that's an object. It could be an array of objects, or an object of arrays, arrays, objects of arrays. You get the point. It's fun. Okay, we're wrapping up. Don't worry, this is it. I just included these because I need you guys to know that in case you get these following errors, look for this. Okay? Trust me, if somebody had told me this, it would have saved my life. Whenever you get a reference error, it just means that you wrote something wrong. I saw somebody put height, missing the E, typing really quickly. You're going to get a reference error. So when that happens, you're like, oh crap, where did I misspell? Double check, there it is. If you get a syntax error, here what's missing from this slide. What's missing? Anybody catch it?
The semicolon at the end.
First bracket after the
Oh.
Yeah, there's this bracket, right? You see it?
Yeah,
Yeah, you guys are going to become like hawks after a while of programming. You're going to be like, why is there no bracket? Like, right? It doesn't matter what distance. Like, Jake all the way to the back is like, bracket. So anyway, yeah, keep that in mind. And whenever you try to do something you're not supposed to, you're going to get something called a type error. Like, we haven't talked about the null just because you rarely actually do anything with it, but null is null. It's empty. It's nothing. So when you try to call a method inside of it, it's going to go, what are you doing, buddy? So just keep that in mind. You're doing something you're not supposed to. And to fix this error, you can try the debugger. The debugger should work. Because this is perfectly fine syntax. There's nothing wrong with the syntax. But the thing is that during runtime, when you actually try to do this, it's going to go, what? So it's going to crash at that point. So the debugger, if you put it before it, it won't crash, and you'll notice what's going on after that. Best practices. Okay, so wrapping up, do not do this, please. I've seen a lot of people do that. Just go, I need to put a variable, I gotta do this, I gotta do a function, I gotta return it, I gotta do this. Okay, done. Do me a favor, put in spaces, make your life easier. This is a lot easier to read, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but years of experience, so assume that I'm right. You want to do it like this. So just add more spaces. In fact, I do 1 space between equals to 2. Why not? Just do 2. Usually you conform to whatever your team does. So Google has a coding style sheet or a style guide. Spotify has their own. Facebook has their own. You just conform to whatever other people are doing because everybody needs to play along with each other. The description of variables, sometimes I've used I, and I is just perfectly good one because it's indexed. Everybody knows what I is. But A, what the heck is A? So it's better to use count if you're going to do some kind of counting. Instead of fn for the function, just tell me what you're doing. And by the way, functions, they're usually verbs. So do calculations, or calculate, right? That would be better than that one. And finally, there were some people putting spaces in variables. No, there is no way. There is no way that's going to work. The best thing you can do is you do an underscore, right? That works. But the thing is that in JavaScript world, nobody does underscore. So you do, in JavaScript world, you use what's called camel case. So you can see the equivalent, right? My underscore name, my capital N. Again, just so you know when you counter it, literally they're trying to tell your eyes there's a space between the my and name. But it's together in this case. And by the way, why put my name if it's the first name? Just put first name, right? Just be more descriptive. Just tell me what it's supposed to be. And the parentheses. This is the equivalent of that over there. And if you notice, with the curly braces, you can clearly tell what's supposed to run when. The thing at the bottom, like is the break inside the loop? I don't know. The best way is to just put the curly braces. That way you know what's exactly supposed to happen. So as you can see here, if you put a break outside of a loop, by the way, a for loop, while loop, for in loop, doesn't matter, it's going to throw an error. So this is why this sucks. I sometimes do it out of bad habit, like the if statements, like if it's a one-liner. But that's me, and I've gone through the pains already. And there is such a thing as an else if loop. I mean, a statement, else if. I hate it. I've seen a lot of people use it. It looks very pretty. It does, very clean. But people don't actually notice what it is, what it actually does. If else if, it literally is else if, like this. See the whole if statement there? If else statement in there? People think that it's like one thing, then the other, then the other. It doesn't work that way. It works this way. This is the equivalent of that. And to me, this is easier to read. I can see, okay, this or this. This or this. This, I'm like, well, where's the or of this? Is this an or this, or is this or this? I don't know. I mean, I might be rambling, but... and then these are for you guys, for your checking of your understanding. When you guys go home, is declare a variable count and give it a value of 10, multiply the width times the height, create an if statement in pairs, create a for loop, blah, blah, blah. And I want you guys to post the answers on the forum if you like. I can check your answers. And that way you guys can tell whether you learned something today or whatever. And you can also do this one, create a function named log that takes an argument message, have the function return true, the message is more than 5 characters long. And by the way, we didn't go over this, but a string has a length as well. So you can do string.length. And additional practices for you guys, are all numbers positive, or is the average of the cache one? Fix this code, and multiply arrays. Have fun with those. I think this is the last slide. If you haven't started, work on the Code Academy JS, the JavaScript section. It's 10 hours, it's actually less, doesn't have to take you that long. I encourage you to do it because it's good practice. Read the built-in properties and methods, similar like to the length, as well as math, as well as all the other things that we didn't talk about. That's going to help you as well eventually. But using the debugger and using somebody else's code, you will learn those by inference and by context. And I want you to create something. And you had asked a question about frameworks. If you're just going to do web development and nothing too fancy, use jQuery. Nothing wrong with jQuery. Just I got in trouble once by saying something bad about jQuery, and I just told the world now. But anyway, nothing wrong with jQuery. You can use jQuery, but if you're going to do something more involved with like backend, front end, and models, so on and so on, AngularJS, Meteor, and Ionic. Ionic, if you're not familiar, is to develop mobile apps with just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. That's it. So if you learn Ionic, you'll have a mobile app in no time, especially if you learn JavaScript. And that's it, folks. Nice. Any questions? What's love got